Today we're going to speak a bit about intuition and instinct. We're going to segment the two, and we're going to understand them to a deeper degree to help us with something very important that happens to us on the journey. And what we want is proactivity, the ability to understand the different experiences that we're having and our emotional integration with those experiences, and from the perspective of the emotional stimulus, to be able to understand the intuitive and accurate meaning of interpretation, to further affirm and hold ourselves true to that understanding, true understanding of our experiences, to move ourselves forward to a higher degree of what we call WEI, which is sometimes referred to as action through inaction, or precise action, intuitive action, effortless action, inspired action, or knowing when to act and when not to act, knowing that sometimes when we don't act, we produce the results. Sometimes when we act, we produce the results. Confusion is removed as to the degree of application and understanding and integration of WEI upon understanding what we react to based on instinct. Now, for whatever the reason may be, hardwired certain responses over to stimulus from the outer world. Now, when we have a vision, something we want to see brought forth, we can experience what we call reactivity to what somebody says, to an experience that we have on the journey, a circumstance, which brings us into a different state of mind. One of fight or flight, or insecurity. We can categorize this and say reactivity. So reactivity recreates certain experiences by changing our state of mind and thus changing our inner dialogue. So thus, we want to understand when this is happening so we can intercept what would otherwise be subconsciously applied interpretation to those experiences based on past programming, and change that interpretation to be in alignment with what we call proactivity or WEI. Now, what we also have is intuition. So intuition, understanding or knowing without conscious recourse to thought, observation, or reason. Knowingness. Intuition is transcendent to instinct. Intuition is also associated with the true inner voice. It's the guide that leads us towards our vision, and it is found within. Via meditation, either active meditation, which is being engaged in what we're doing, being in flow or autotelic, one with what we're doing, we find ourselves knowing what to say, knowing what to do, making the right decision at the right time. When we are in a traditional form of meditation, which I otherwise refer to as passive meditation, we also find ourselves connecting deeper to intuition. Insights and perspectives seem to flow during the meditation as well as after the meditation. Intuition is what we're working with if we want to bring ourselves to a higher level of being or an identity, a state of mind that is more reflective of our vision. If we were to zoom out, we would look at it from the perspective of being less reactive, creating unnecessary complexity in the mind and in the behaviors. So the way over to the destination is found within via the inner voice and intuition. Usually, when we can imagine ourselves in the ideal outcome, we find ourselves in that moment in the ideal state of mind. And then, as we go about our day-to-day, we might become identified with circumstance or interpretations of the circumstances that is a result of reactivity. However, we have the ability to change this hardwiring through conscious reflection of our experiences on the day-to-day and changing our interpretation. This is why journaling is important. And what I recommend is, at the end of the day, reflecting upon these times where you have been reactive and asking yourself intuitively, what is the true interpretation of these circumstances in relation to my vision? Perhaps you're building a business and your sales wasn't up to par as it was when you reflect back on the progress of the month. Instinctively, you may have a fight or flight or a insecure or reactive-based response to the disempowerment. And the conclusion may be, I'm not able to produce the success, so I'm not going to make it. When we bring ourselves to a center and we reflect, we'll realize that that was a reactive-based interpretation. It is simply not accurate and true to the vision. If you have seen it in your imagination and you believe it to be true, then what is in alignment and what is accurate is in harmony with that vision. Upon reflection of this idea, we look at it and say, the progress that was made was far greater than the day before. And you start to look at the other progresses you've made, and you start to see it all as in contribution. You say, well, even if I didn't get the sales numbers up, I still rolled out on a whole bunch of projects, which are going to bring forth more clients. I still received more propositions for future business deals, which could turn into profitable opportunities. I have some partnerships that are lined up as a result of some of these opportunities that came in, which I thought were going to convert over to clients, but rather now they're going to turn into some partnership opportunities, which could end up bringing forth more leads. Now, all of this is facilitated from, it is what we otherwise refer to as the fourth dimensional self or the spiritual self. And in the last video, we brought up a word that Neville brought up in one of his discussions. The word is incurrent. And he states, you must open the incurrent eye because you're going to see inwards into the world of thought, into eternity. The word incurrent means giving passage to a current that flows inward, such as a sponge when placed in water. So if we're overly identified with instinct, we can say we're overly identified with the five sensory world, which is an effect of the mind. As we understand the five sensory world and the instinct of what it's implying, we can change what it implies to what is accurate via intuition. And through this in-seeing eye, we recognize that what we really saw when we looked in our imagination of the vision realized was a glimpse into eternity where all things exist. Now, this gets into the concept of we've been talking about over the last videos about the natural self and the fourth dimensional self. Natural self being identified largely with instinct, and the spiritual self identified with intuition. Now I've pulled some quotes here from a number of my favorite New Thought authors, Florence Scovel Shinn, James Allen, and Charles Haanel, to further stimulate this discussion. Now Florence Scovel Shinn said it really well. She said, prayer is telephoning to God, and intuition is God telephoning to you. She says the answer will come through intuition or hunch, a chance remark from someone or a passage in a book, etc. The answers are sometimes quite startling in their exactness. Now, one of the things that I encourage a lot is building a relationship with your own fourth dimensional self, which we are reverting back to through the journey of bringing forth our success. Because when we do that, we become more of who we really are. Now, as we begin to identify with this true self-image, we start to really understand that what we desire is actually something that was bringing us back to who we really are. And we will always go down this journey of desiring what we truly desire. Which is why you hear me say many times that the journey is as valuable as the destination, or as joyous as the destination. Because when you select in your imagination something that you desire to see brought forth, and you commit to it, you go down a journey via intuition to the realization of that experience. And in the process, the concept of self changes. Your self-image and identity reverts back to the original true self, fourth dimensional self-based identity. And another reason why I say build a relationship with this aspect of yourself is you'll find you'll have very distinct inner voice conversations if you can have a conversation with this aspect of yourself. You can already imagine who this person is, which is you, in the end result after you've achieved your goal. You can see in your mind's eye how they communicate, what they say, how they behave, how they carry themselves. And you can go into your imagination and have a conversation with them. This is called a inner voice conversation. You've heard me mention this many times. Now, through this inner voice conversation, you could reflect back on the experiences that you've had during the day and recognize that a bunch of the interpretations could be instinct-based interpretations from the perspective of reactivity, insecurity, fight or flight. And you have the power to, through this inner dialogue, find the accurate interpretation, which is one of conviction to the vision. Spirit of harmony, benefit for you, others, and the vision. You'll find that the inner voice will bring you to a higher degree of confidence and faith. We talked about faith in the last video, and we're going to do more discussions on the concept of faith, which is loyalty to the vision, unwavering, lighthearted loyalty to the vision. Now, perhaps on our day-to-day journey, we've experienced some reactivity, which seems to have broken the faith. Now, that's based on interpretation. If we can find the interpretation that broke the faith, we can change that interpretation, which is provided by intuition, to connect us back to the faith. And that's what she was referring to here. Now, James Allen, in one of my favorite books, As a Man Thinketh, brought this up, and I remember listening to this book over and over again in audiobook format when I first came across it, and I still do regularly, especially when I'm at the gym or run, because for whatever the reason may be, it's during those times where I could really deeply reflect on what he's saying and really understand it to a deeper degree. So I do it. Now, the premise of this book is changing the concept of self. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Sometimes in spiritual texts, when they say the heart, they also refer to it in the context of the subconscious mind or the true self. So what we're doing on this journey to bringing forth our success, our vision, is we're identifying more so with this original and true self. And this came as a result of many dialogues and conversations I've had with many on this journey, primarily in the space of entrepreneurship, in which we reflected back on their experiences in childhood and the current way that they're living after they've brought their success forth and continue to bring success forth, and whatever they touch seems to turn to gold. They seem to have the confidence, the charisma, and the ability to bring forth whatever they desire with ease. And what I discovered upon conversation is that they reverted back to these childlike attributes which perhaps at some point in their journey they had repressed or suppressed. Simply put, who they really are was revealed at an earlier part of childhood, and through some experiences they had through childhood was suppressed and repressed, only to later on in the journey reveal itself again through bringing forth success. Because when they committed to something and brought it forth, they actually did what we're talking about right here. They were able to cause and effect reflect, either through the end of the night or by themselves or with others. Look at the different meaning, interpretation, perspectives, assumptions, and beliefs that they are assigning to the different experiences that they're having on the journey and changing it. Through the process, they developed a deeper connection with intuition. And they found themselves being who they are more so each day. And this is probably one of the biggest fascinations that I had with As a Man Thinketh, because he says it right here. He says, there could be no progress, no achievement without sacrifice. And a man's worldly success will be in the measure that he sacrifices his confused animal thoughts and fixes his mind on the development of his plans and the strengthening of his resolution and self-reliance. Now, upon deeper reflection upon this, we recognize that when he's referring to confused animal thoughts, he's talking about changing those certain hardwired, or so they seem hardwired, patterns of behavior and aligning it towards the development of his plans. It's keeping your mind fixed on a vision. Doesn't mean you think about it all the time, but you recognize that no matter what shows up on the journey, all interactions with people, environment, circumstance, and information is related because it is in harmony, because you committed to that vision, and this is all part of the unfoldment, the revelation of the vision. Any indecision, fears, doubts that we identify with that seem to bring us into reactivity is our own subconscious association to those interpretations playing out as theater as our experiences in life. And we have the power to change it. Because what we are becoming in this process is more of the fourth dimensional self, the true self. So when he's saying sacrifices his confused animal thoughts, it's really referring to not allowing ourselves to be at the same level of understanding that we once were. We are constantly evolving into higher versions, higher aspects, higher attributes, or more specifically put, more of who we truly are. Because as I had those conversations, it was very distinctively clear that at some point in their journey, in the earlier stages, they had clues, signs, inner dialogues, intuition, understanding that they were going to be who they became today. Now, all of us have this opportunity. We can reflect on this and say, is this how we're living? Are we committing to what we truly desire, our visions? Or are we allowing past programming to cause us to become reactive rather than being guided from within to more evolved and accurate interpretations of ourselves in relation to whatever shows up in harmony to our vision, to mold us into who we actually are? So he keeps this simple. He said, a man should conceive of a legitimate purpose in his heart and set out to accomplish it. He should make this purpose the central point of his thoughts. So the exercise, the way of being, is to focus the thoughts. It's the intuitive way of being, the natural way of being. And then we segment it now into 3 parts here, where he says, it may take the form of a spiritual ideal, or it may be a worldly object according to his nature at the time being. But whichever it is, he should steadily focus his thought forces upon the object which he has set before him. So this requires practice, cause and effect reflection, looking at the interpretations that we're giving to whatever shows up on the journey, and bringing them into the accurate interpretation found within via intuition. And as stated by Florence Scovel Shinn, it can also show up as a remark from someone or a passage in a book. However, this is distinct from allowing the opinions of others to sway you off course. This is rather being able to sift and sort through the information that's being presented to you via intuition within to guide you to the accurate interpretation of what they are saying. It's distinct. Now, if a person can do this, we say they got a high level of self-esteem, high level of self-confidence. Well, when you have a high level of self-esteem, Self-confidence, when you commit to a vision, you stay committed until you bring it forth. And as he stated here, it could be a spiritual ideal or a worldly object. Perhaps it's to make a certain amount of money. Maybe it's to get a certain level of success in your career. Maybe it's a relationship you want. Or to advance in your career. Or to get your college degree, whatever it is. That is an opportunity to practice all of this that we're talking about. Now, the reason why we're infusing that into this conversation here, even though this is spoken a lot about in the realm of personal development, is because I want to emphasize intuition. And what we want is, I mentioned this in the last video, a nice harmony between knowledge and experience so we can acquire wisdom. Too much accumulation of knowledge and we can get too stuck in our head. If we just take a whole bunch of action but we don't reflect upon our action, we may end up doing the same thing again and again and again and the result's not changing. We want to find the right ratio. However, it's found by picking a goal and committing to it and observing on the journey where we are recreating the patterns of the past based on instinct and where we can realign those patterns as needed. Don't necessarily need to do them for all of the patterns. What's needed with intuition so you can experience a more flow-based journey to the destination. And the second part, he said, he should make this purpose his supreme duty and should devote himself to its attainment, not allowing his thoughts to wander away into ephemeral fancies, longings, and imaginings. This is the royal road to self-control and true concentration of thought. So, through this process of picking a goal and saturating your mind with what is in harmony and related to the goal, and observing if there's any interpretations that you have that were past interpretations, finding the understanding and accurate meaning within by practicing your connection with intuition, such as how I described with the inner voice, you maintain the same thought process and the ideal state of mind and the related thoughts that shape your world. And in the process, you also release from any identification to a self-image that is not who you are. And thus you'll experience a higher degree of self-confidence and faith, loyalty to the vision, unwavering, lighthearted conviction. And this is a commitment because he says here in the third part, even if he fails again and again to accomplish his purpose, and in brackets he says, as he necessary must until weakness is overcome. And when we're saying weakness, we're referring to thinking and association and interpretation of whatever shows up on the journey that you identify with that leads you to believe that you are weak. As we've been discussing, who you are is divine perfection, and you are one of strength. The interpretations that you can have can label yourself as weakness, but you have the power to not accept those interpretations and change them. And then as he states, the strength of character gained will be the measure of his true success, and this will form a new starting point for future power and triumph. So, once you pick a goal and see it all the way to completion, by committing to the information that we've been discussing and integrating it, then you've ascended into a higher version and more in alignment with who you really are. And then from there, you pick another goal and see it all the way to completion. Now, Charles Haanel, in his book, The Master Key System, spoke a lot about consciousness. And he also spoke a lot about the world within. And as he states, there's a world within, a world of thought and feeling and power, of light and life, beauty, and although invisible, its forces are mighty. See, intuition allows us to tap into and work with these invisible forces which are part of you. These are aspects of you that are buried within the subconscious. And we awaken these attributes and bring them into existence through the process of what we've been discussing. There's a world within that is infinite. Infinite. Everything that has been brought forth in this outer world is limited compared to the infinite potentiality of what's in the inner world via imagination. You can imagine anything, and you can commit to whatever you imagine, and as you stay committed through this process, you're able to see it into existence. And for whatever the reason may be, we might be taught that it's just our imagination, not recognizing that we have this unique ability, and anybody who's ever been able to bring forth success, and we've done it many times in our own journey, it was first an ideal that was affirmed to be done in the imagination, and then it was brought forth. That's the power of imagination. You can select anything in your imagination and you can commit to it. That's also what he's referring to when he's speaking of the world within. And to further discuss this, he says, the world within is governed by mind. When we discover this world, we shall find the solution for every problem, the cause for every effect, and since the world within is subject to our control, all laws of power and possessions are also within our control, via our mind. If you pause for a moment and you ask yourself, who's the one interpreting everything? Past, present, future, circumstance, vision, ability to bring forth the vision, assumptions about inability to bring forth the vision? There's only one person, and that person is you. We can say that others are interpreting it, but when we dig deeper, we'll see that we are interpreting others to see those interpretations, as in we are interpreting them to have those interpretations. And when we change those interpretations, what happens? Well, as he states here, the consciousness that focuses in your brain cells is the same consciousness which focuses in the brain cells of every other individual. Each individual is but the individualization of the universal, the cosmic mind. We are all individuals of the one mind, but our mind segments things. Why does it segment things? Well, segmentation is important for this five sensory experience. However, the fourth dimensional self sees no segmentation. It sees everything as one, realizes it as one. The fourth dimensional self understands that all things exist and infinite pathways to the realization of all potentialities, and guides the natural self via intuition. The natural self, as stated, is more identified with, a lot of times, instinct and has interpretations, otherwise we call this beliefs, that overly identify us with disempowering ways of interpreting our journey to the realization. And he states, and as the most powerful forces of nature are the invisible forces, so we find that the most powerful forces of man are his invisible forces, his spiritual force. And the only way in which the spiritual force can manifest is through the process of thinking. Thinking is the only activity which the spirit possesses, and thought is the only product of thinking. So what are we thinking in relation to the journey? Are we thinking from the wiring of the past, which a lot of it we can connect back to instinct? Or are we thinking what is accurate and in relation to the vision, which is the thinking of intuition found within? Now, when we align with this thinking within, intuition, it is then said that we have a high level of self-esteem, self-confidence, and then we really understand the concept of WEI, knowing when to act, when not to act, effortless action or actionless action. See, we live in a world today where this is more important than ever before. We are surrounded with more complex information from multiple sources on many different nuanced perspectives, and this can be very confusing if we do not connect back to our intuition to help us accurately discern what is the signal, what is in harmony, and what is in relation to our vision and how. That's why connecting back to the intuition is very important, now more so than ever before. And the simple practice, as it has always been, as it has been on my journey and others that I've connected with, is to pick one goal. And as James Allen said in his book, As a Man Thinketh, set out to accomplish it and make this purpose the centralizing point of your thoughts. From there, certain doubts, indecisions, inaccurate thinking is excluded out of consciousness. You find yourself deep in the flow, become one with your vision. We call this in the Kabbalion the stage of involution. Or we discuss this from the concept of flow, autotelic, being so one with what you're doing. Then you'll find it's easier to stay focused. It's easier to maintain this intuitive connection. And in the process, you will find yourself evolving past what seem to have been hardwired tendencies to react in certain ways, thus evolving the concept of self and bringing it into connection with who you really are. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.